Heath and Lindsey Martin have had a lot of success at their lease in Kansas through the years. Late last summer, they planted a small food plot with Eagle Seeds monster wheat, preparing for this hunting season. As it always seems to happen, it turned dry right after Heath planted the plot, so he tried to water it as much as he could to keep it alive until the rains returned. Heath's strategy worked because about a month and a half later, they returned to Kansas and had a lot of action on that plot. They saw a lot of critters during that hunt, but never had a shot at a buck they wished to tag. A few days after that hunt, a cold front was forecast to pass through Kansas. Heath and Lindsey made the decision to wash their hunting gear, pack it up, and return to Kansas. The daytime highs were forecast to be in the 40s, a northwest wind, and high pressure. Perfect conditions for them to hunt out of a Redneck Blind near one of the plots. On the way to the blind, he stopped at a Reconyx camera and pulled the card, and then looked at the pictures once in the blind. While reviewing the pictures, he was pleased to see a mature buck had been in the area. Heath didn't recognize the buck. It was the first picture of him, and it was October 13th. The unknown buck had also walked by the camera on October 15th, so Heath was hoping he'd show in the plot that afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. We just got back up to our lease here in Kansas. It is October the 15th. The high today's been about 45. It was in the little high 30s this morning, and it's supposed to freeze in the morning. So we got into our ghillie blinds here. We got a north-northwest wind. We're set up good over our Eagle Seed buck monster wheat food plot. And this is a place I've had a couple encounters over the years with a buck we call the other guy. There's another shooter buck we've got pictures of. We don't have a name for him yet, but he's a really cool buck. I'd probably shoot him too if we got an opportunity.
Not long after getting settled in the blind, two does entered the plot.
Oh, there's a buck behind her.
Suddenly, he spotted antlers in the timber. It was the buck that had walked in front of the camera. This buck had a pot belly and big shoulders. Heath knew he was mature and a shooter. After seeing the buck in person, Heath recognized it as high and tight. The last time they'd saw high and tight was in 2016, and they just got a glimpse as he passed through some trees. This buck had disappeared for a long time, but now he was standing 30 yards in front of Heath. With all the excitement, Heath wondered if he'd made a good shot.
shot him, that's a little bit, I was thinking I'd hit him perfect behind the shoulder, but I think it was a good shot.
Heath and Lindsey climbed out of blind and picked up the trail. They didn't have to walk far.
He didn't make it 30, 25 yards in the woods. And we're 60 yards from the blind. I shot him to 30. He's dead right there. Yes. It's been a couple years since I've shot a buck here on our lease in Kansas. I've been pretty picky trying to shoot big mature deer. I've had a couple of really good encounters, and last year I should have killed a big deer out of that same exact plot, actually. A big deer we called the other guy. He hadn't showed up this year yet, but he probably will later. This buck just showed up on the plot a couple days ago, just in the last day or two. Checked the cards when we got to the blind today. Took my computer, pulled the cards, and he'd been on there just the last night or two, and I didn't recognize him at first because he's a smaller. He's actually a little smaller going downhill than he was a couple years ago. He's getting so old. But today when he started coming up in there and I could tell how old and mature he was, got to putting it all together, I figured it had to be old high and tight. He's always had these kickers on his G2s and inside points and big mass, and never been very wide, so we called him high and tight. Come sneaking in with 2 does on October the 15th. Who'd have thunk it? The last 2-3 years, we're getting where we've killed several deer up here in October, especially with this cold front. Beautiful, perfect cold front weather today. And I mean, I plugged him right in the heart. He didn't go, I mean, we can see the blind from here. He probably didn't go 60 yards from where I shot him.
Congratulations, Heath, on an incredible story of high and tight. High and tight had been missing in action for Heath and Lindsey since 2016. That's not uncommon. I often hear from hunters that had a picture or saw a mature deer only for that buck to go missing in action. They ask me, do I think he's still alive? Well, it's impossible for me to know. But I do know, as bucks mature, often their home range gets smaller and smaller. And it may be that from one year to the next, the home range shrunk enough that it's no longer covering an area where that hunter was hunting. Bucks also shift and use different portions of their home range based on the conditions and the time of year. With all these factors, just because we're no longer getting pictures or seeing a mature buck doesn't mean that he's been killed somewhere else.